everybody. My name is Tal, and a few days ago, quantiloop have gone out with a big update to the quantiloop looper, and I wanted to go over a few of the things that were done there as a sort of a tutorial. You might have seen the previous video I made where I showed how quantiloop and loopphd and AUM all work together nicely. And now quantiloop has made sort of an update that can make things much simpler in some senses. So let's go over to the iPad and see how it looks like. Okay, so we're in the quantiloop app. First of all, the first thing I want to see here is in setup. One of the things that iOS has, which is kind of annoying, is that when you start with an interface or an app that takes the audio, then that first app determines the buffer size or the latency. And so one of the things that quantiloop has made sure is that you can change the latency here even if other apps are available. I use mostly 5 milliseconds or 256 frames. This is something that is not short, such that you'll get clicks or pops, but not very long, so you don't have real latency here. So I recommend to use that. In the phrase edit here, there are a bunch of settings that you can make, whether the 4 tracks in quantiloop are working in parallel or maybe in serial or maybe mixed. You can have the track length as a multiple of the previous tracks or as a free track length. Really depends on what you want. And also you have down here quantize parameters if the play mode is instant or according to measures or according to beats and so on. It's really quite flexible, and you can choose whatever you want according to your needs. Now these phrase edits that I just showed are global, but in each of these tracks you have a track edit, and you can choose whether the parameters are according to that global definition or according to whatever you want for that individual track. Okay, so all of this is not really new. The big thing that is new in this quantiloop version is the input and output routing or mixing possibilities. So let's check that. In the input, you can have up to 4 inputs into quantiloop app. Okay, each of them is this column that you see here, and let's go over this from top to bottom. So first is what is the input. This could be a physical input like the Helix, so you can choose either USB 1 or 2 or either of them, or maybe just a mono input, whatever you want. You can use an instrument plugin where you can have other apps on your iPad inputting sound. So it could be AUM, it could be synth apps, it could be all sorts of things, and we'll get to that in a minute. Down below that, you can add effects like reverb or any audio unit effects that you have. Right now, I don't have anything on there. You can pan the input left or right, and if you double click it, it goes back to the middle. Unfortunately, for now, quantiloop does not support control over the panning and input volume from the outside. You have to do it from within the app, and I hope this will come in the next update. You have a slider here for the input volume of that channel, and here you have these little squares that shows you, do you monitor your input or not, and where do you send that input into the 4 tracks or 4 loopers that you can operate simultaneously in quantiloop. So for now, I don't want to hear the input because otherwise it will multiply the volume by 2 in the settings that I have, and I'm using only 2 tracks, so 1 or 2 are highlighted here and 3 and 4 are not highlighted. They're grayed out. And also I have a synth app called Sample Tank in there, which is currently totally off, and we'll get to that later on in this video. Okay, so this is the input section. In the output section, right here, all right, You have a main volume that goes to whatever destination you choose, and you have a monitor track which can have the rhythm on it also. You can choose to have a rhythm out on the main output as well. And you have individual tracks. So for example, in this example, I use the rhythm and send it back to the Helix in USB 5 or 6. And if I click it on and I allow it on my Helix, and we'll see that in a minute, then we can hear the rhythm track. Okay, so let's forget about that right now. Okay, so the different volumes in the output are sort of a mixer for the different inputs and tracks that you have on in quantiloop. All right, now the next thing I want to touch upon is the MIDI input and output. So in the MIDI out, you can send the MIDI clock to different apps or to the Helix. I don't go into in depth into the MIDI clock issues, which were um, very much updated in the latest Helix firmware. And in the Helix, in the MIDI input, we can see that we have to enable the MIDI. We can choose the MIDI channel, and this could be either Omni, which means it goes to all MIDI channels, or accepts commands only in specific channel. When working with different MIDI sources or MIDI apps, I use a different channel for each of them, so I'll have everything organized nicely. You can see down here that it accepts program changes. We'll see in a minute how an instant MIDI command looks like on the Helix, and this will actually choose the preset that I have in quantiloop out of this bank here. Okay. If I want to control the assignment of a MIDI command, so for example, we see here that MIDI CC command number 83 goes to track 1, and the first press of a button starts record, the second press of a button goes to play mode, and the third one goes to overdub mode. And you can go into that, and first of all, you see the action here, and you have also a double tap which creates an undo or redo function. And if you want to change the action, you have a whole list of actions here that you can change or whatever you want here. Let's go back one step. We see that the MIDI command is a CC command, number 83, latching, and also we have a learn function if we want to do that, but we don't necessarily need to do that. We can go to the Helix and just change the number of the commands. Okay, so let's take a look at the Helix for a minute. Okay, so in the Helix, what we have here is a simple patch where I start with multi input, then I have a sort of a kill switch for the main line, then I have an amp, a reverb, delay, some overdrive, and a cab, and all of this goes to a multi output. For the sample tank synth that I showed you before, I also have a parallel track that nothing happens on it except it goes to USB 1 and 2, so I can hear it through quantiloop, and we'll show it in a minute. Okay, the second path here is USB 5 and 6. This gets the rhythm from or the metronome from quantiloop, as we saw before, and goes output to the XLR, so we don't hear it continuously all the time. Okay, so if we look down here at the foot switches, I have one foot switch for track 1 on quantiloop, one foot switch for track 2 on quantiloop. I have a clear all quantiloop command, and I have a stop immediately command here. So these are the four foot switches that I use for quantiloop. I also have a few of those foot switches for stuff on the Helix, like operate the drive or increase the gain. This click thing is the foot switches that controls the path holding the rhythm track, and the main foot switch here kills the main path that we saw here for now. Okay, if we go and click on these three lines and go to Command Center, we see that a few of those are highlighted with a green triangle. So if we go all the way up to the top left here, we see an instant program where I use a bank prog command on MIDI channel number 3, because we saw in quantiloop I defined everything to be on channel 3, and I choose program number 2. This one calls for that specific tracking quantiloop that we're using right now. So essentially, when I move with the banks here to the patch that I'm using on Helix, it will immediately call the relevant preset also on quantiloop. So this is quite handy. And here we see that for track 1, we see command number 83 with a value that only needs to be non-zero. It doesn't really matter what it is, except it's non-zero. For track number 2, I have command 84, and then I have command 87, which I defined for clear all, and I have command number 86 that I defined for stop all immediately. Okay, so this is what we need to get to go. So I'll just prepare what I showed you when I started this video. So, all right. We saw here that first I started with track 1. It became red and recorded what I played until I hit the button again, and then it went to this yellow play mode, and that defined the length of the track. Now the second track, because it's a multiple of the first track, it became at the exact same length, so I didn't need to really bother about hitting it right on the spot when I recorded track 2. And now I have both of them. I can control the volume, and I can play on that with some more gain. Now the last thing I wanted to show is how to use this sample tank app within quantiloop. So this is a MIDI guitar to iPad conversion that I'm not explaining exactly how to do that today. I'll do that in a separate video soon. So what I do with it for that is that, first of all, on the Helix I kill the main guitar, so I don't really hear it anymore. And in the input section of quantiloop, I turn on the monitoring here. Okay, and I'll just put some volume back on, and I can play with the thing through the iPad. right. So that was the video of how to use quantiloop with the new version, and also showing that we can play with in different apps through quantiloop. Uh, be sure to check out the next video that I'll put on soon, which explains this whole MIDI guitar thing if you don't know it. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Hit me up with questions in the comments or PM me. And happy noodling. Thanks. Bye.